Hello, and welcome to the Information Security Summit podcast, also being featured on the Threat Hunter podcast. I'm Robert Netkin, and I'm the fill-in host today. Scott Poley has been hit with a virus, not the binary kind, but the biological kind, and he's out of commission temporarily, and we wish Scott well. And Scott, we miss you here, and would love to see you at the conference. And I know you'd like to be here instead of there, no question about it. Today I have guests with me, Ken Smith and A.J. Hammond. Both of these gentlemen are from Praetorian. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That is correct. Yep.
Now, tell us about Praetorian. What is Praetorian?
Yeah, so we're an offensive security firm, and we specialize in...
Now, is it offensive? Does that mean you offend everybody? What is it? I'm an offensive security firm. Please don't offend me.
We're the ethical hackers, right? We're the...
Offensive security means you're the good guys who hack and find out what's wrong to fix the things that bad guys would come. Is that what you
exactly
do?
it.
I tell everyone, hey, when they ask me, hey, what do you do for a living? I say, well, I hack things and show them how I got in and how to fix it so bad guys can't do it.
Yep.
So tell us your story. I mean, what is this the business of Praetorian?
Yes. We're again high-end red teaming, so playing the role of a emulated real threat actor.
So for the folks who are not part of the Security Nerd Club,
Sure.
We call ourselves CISSPs. What does red team mean?
Yeah, so the term goes back to the Cold War, right? Military teams would emulate, the red communist Russia threat and pretend to be, the bad folks to get into military bases, to, get where they shouldn't be, and then afterwards show this is how we got in. Let's shore up our defenses in these particular areas. And then so that the term has carried through. It's now different than what would be called a normal pen test, where we're just looking to enumerate vulnerabilities. A red team is really more kind of full scope. Where we are trying to find every which way in, and it's more about looking to provoke a response to see if the organization is ready to actually react to a particular threat.
Now, are you guys the actual pen testers?
I am.
He is.
Yeah,
AJ, you get to have the fun.
I do. It's man, I've been interested in it ever since I was a kid. Honestly, this position here at Praetorian, I was at RSM for right around 4 years through college and first 2 years out of college, and then I recently, this past March, joined on at Praetorian. It's been a dream. It's so fun. I have such a blast working.
So, when you're attacking a client, is there a profile that a client has, or is it like all shapes and sizes of companies?
All shapes and sizes. Red teams, typically, like Ken mentioned, is a little more full scope. We go from absolutely nothing to developing our own social engineering campaigns with the aid of open source intelligence to getting internal access, whether it's someone detonating a payload or device code phishing or octa code phishing, and then getting all the way to domain and admin, exfiltrating data. And the difference between something like a red team and a normal internal pen test is pretty much stealth.
So when you say exfiltrating data, what does that mean to, again, the uninitiated, those who are not inside the security bubble?
Yeah, so some clients oftentimes will have trophies that like they're crown jewels that can't leave the network, right? And if we can go and exfiltrate that, well, then that's a problem for the client, and they need to
Wait a minute,
immediately
pull
fix
it
it.
out of the network.
If you're like the empirical hacker who actually gets a copy of the stuff they don't want to be disclosed,
Right.
that means you've captured the flag, to use a metaphor that's often
Exactly.
used in security. Is you've beaten their defenses.
Absolutely.
Now, how
yeah.
long does it take you to get into some of these companies?
It varies. I've had red teams where within 3 days we had achieved objective, and I've had red teams where we don't achieve objective. So normally red teams are scoped out for like 3 weeks to a month. So it could be at any given moment, to be honest with you. The average would probably be right around the 2 to 3 week mark if I had to make an average.
Now, is there, just to ask a silly question, is there a pattern you observe amongst many of these companies and these folks who say, yeah, come in, red team, we're tough, we're secure. Do you see a pattern amongst the ones who say they're secure and you're not going to get in, or do you see a pattern, the ones that are humble and say, well, just tell us what's wrong? I mean, What has your experience been?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say too, it also varies. When there's overconfidence, when there's obvious overconfidence, it almost comes off as a challenge for the folks that work in this space, where they say, you're never going to get in here. Then it's, well, now we have to. Now we have to get in, right? But there are industries where you expect the security to be higher, right? The financial sector, and just a really good example where it usually takes an extra level of effort to be able to accomplish anything because the focus is there, right? Whereas if we're breaking into an industry where there's just less likely to be controls in place, or there is more spread out, chances are higher that we'll get in more quickly.
Are bigger companies an easier target just because there's a greater surface area
Another
than
good
smaller
question.
companies?
I would say if the budget is there, it makes them more difficult, right? The bigger the attack surface, the more likely we are to get in, right? So if we're looking at a mom and pop shop, they have one external IP address, 3 or 4 users, it's a lot harder to get in sometimes, right? Depending on the vector we're looking at. Whereas if we're looking at a large, multinational, corporation, there is more attack surface, so we're going to find things, but we're also probably more likely to be detected as well.
Now, I've heard that a statistic that's often repeated is that multi-factor authentication reduces your risk of intrusion by 80%. Do you agree with that statement? Does MFA make it harder on you guys, or do you find ways around that?
Okay, I can be completely honest here. Yeah, there are definitely ways around it. So phishing, if an attacker knows what they're doing, phishing has evolved to a point where we hijack the browser session now. So, for example, I could send you a phishlet or a phishing email with the lure that clicks a link, or if you click the link and go to the login page, it looks like a Microsoft login, right? And you can
Wait a
put
minute,
in your
it's
credentials.
a fake Microsoft login? There's such a thing as a
Yeah.
login that says
Yes.
log into Microsoft, but it's not really from Microsoft?
No, so I clone the login page, right? And somehow get you to enter your credentials, right? And you think, okay, well, two-factor authentication protects me from that, right? Well, it's redirecting you to the actual Microsoft login page. And once you put your 2FA code in, you are given a cookie that is your session token, which tells the server, hi, yes, I am who I say I am. This is valid for an arbitrary amount of time, let's say an hour, right? For that hour that token is valid, I intercepted that. I could go and paste it right into my browser and log in with your session, effectively circumventing both your password and multi-factor authentication.
I've heard some attackers will ping their target in the middle of the night over and over and over again, so that somebody says, oh, just trying to log in. Okay, fine.
That has also worked for me, yep.
I've called that a denial of sleep attack.
Nice.
Yeah, I've had externals in the past where,
But you've done that. You've done the denial of sleep attack.
yes, and it's worked.
That's funny.
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
really done that.
Yeah. I was on an external. This was back at RSM, and I had done a password spray attack, which is where I take a common password like season, year, exclamation point, like for example now would be fall 2024, and using LinkedIn, right? Everyone puts where they work on LinkedIn, so I can do a scrape for Google and Bing matches that have a first and last name that work at this organization, and make an email list out of that. And what I can do from there is spray against Office 365 with a password like fall 2024. Sure enough, I got a hit. Well, they had two-factor authentication enabled with a duo push notification, so I kept spamming push, 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 push. And eventually I got into their email, which led me to...
Because somebody said, yes.
Yeah,
Stop
and,
bothering me. Because nobody's told them to do otherwise.
Yep.
Yep.
And so I ended up getting internal access, which on an external engagement is considered compromise, so...
Now, when you succeed in your red teaming event, do some of the clients get upset?
Yes.
But they've hired you to do this.
Yes.
And they get upset.
Well, the red teaming it's unique in that, again, it's about provoking that reaction, that response.
So if you're
And-
doing your job, some of them should be upset.
Yes, yes. We've encountered situations where people will say, well, like, I felt attacked. And the reaction has to be good, right? You should, right? But
Because you're simulating what the bad guys are doing, and you're not the bad guys.
Exactly, right? And that's part of consulting, right? I always tell people coming in to consulting, you're not a real consultant until you spend your first hour, getting screamed at by a client for something that you did that was, correct. So those things happen.
It's a rite of passage.
Well, the whole job is calling people's babies ugly, right? And so to being able to deliver it in a way that they understand we're on the same side, like we're doing this for a reason to make the world a safer and more secure place, right?
I can identify with that sentiment. In my previous job, I was IT director. In my previous job, and one of the tasks I had that year was to verify whether or not company policy was being followed with regard to the password policy. And one of the details of the password policy was, don't write down your password. So one night I was there late at the office, and there was a vendor installing a fiber cable, and I had to play babysitter. It's one of the jobs, I guess, of some IT directors.
Sure.
While they were, installing this fiber cable, and I had nothing to do for an hour. I wasn't going to just stand there, watching these guys do it. So I was walking around the office, and I thought, wow, this is an area of 60 cubes. I can be at each cube for about a minute and cover the entire space in 1 hour. And I'm going to spend 45 seconds or something like that at each cube and see if I can find a Post-it note with a password on it. I found 3.
Yeah.
And they all worked.
Yep.
You check under the keyboards?
Yeah.
No, I just checked under the little desk tray, just like out of War Games.
Yeah.
And for all those people that I found, I notified them the following day that I had discovered their password and explained what I did, full disclosure, and put it in my results. That I was basically conducting that internal, evaluation. There were several complaints to the general counsel of the company that I had done this, and to which I said to the general counsel, says, well, gee, this was part of our validation, and gee, if we had hired an outside company to evaluate our security, this is exactly what they would do.
Right.
Yep. And we have. So years ago, when I was still hands behind keyboard, we had a physical break-in. The goal was to get on the network, and that literally was the scenario. We got into a facility, went to a floor where there weren't any people, found a password, logged in, and that was it. Game over. So that's real. That stuff happens.
So, phishing. Is that the most common method that attackers get into corporations? Is they just send an email
And or
hoping that somebody
vishing.
will click in it?
Yeah, vishing too. Yeah, calling.
Calling.
over
What
the
is
phone.
vishing?
Picking up the phone and calling people and essentially manipulating them into getting them to do something like click on a payload.
Oh, but this
or-
would never happen to a casino in Las Vegas.
Not at all. No.
Wait a minute.
No. I can't imagine.
I think it did.
I can't imagine
actually.
something like that would ever happen to.
And it would never happen to an IT. Wait a minute, it did. It was their help desk. Okay, and I say these things just as a point of information. You can do things right and still have an event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In stereo, in unison, no less.
Yeah, it's going to happen, right? And that's where kind of the full scope policy matters. You have to not just be able to block that first attack. The inside can't be squishy, right? We've got to have the ability to react and respond as well.
It's
right?
never an if, it's a when.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you have follow-ups with these folks that you conduct, and do you find it harder on those follow-ups, or do you still get in?
I'd say generally, it's become very common to do retests after something like a regular pen test, where we go and enumerate vulnerabilities, and then we revisit in 3 months and just go through the list. Has this been fixed? Has this been fixed? Has this been fixed? And I would say most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah.
those are addressed.
Especially so my specialty is within Active Directory, like pen testing, Active Directory, internal penetration tests, internal red team, stuff like that. AD is being broken in different ways every month. So it really depends on what's the new hotness in Active Directory pen testing.
I see the smile on your face, and I have this image in my mind that Active Directory is an attacker's friend.
It is. It is. Simply because it's built on so much legacy software and legacy code. And
Is legacy the issue, or is it the specific kind of legacy?
the specific kind of legacy. NTLM as an authentication scheme is really outdated and really broken, and you can do a lot of cool things with it as an attacker.
Now, I understand Microsoft is trying to depreciate NTLM. I mean, they're using Kerberos, are they not?
Yes, Kerberos is also, you can also abuse that in multiple ways, but NTLM, they're trying to deprecate it, but it won't be that way for so long, just because if you think about it, right, like manufacturing organizations, are a prime example, right? They have so much software and hardware, not only just software, but hardware that they depend on to stay up and running and keep making money, that depend on stuff like NTLM, stuff like their printers even, they use LDAP over a non-secure channel, right? As long as older software and older hardware exists and it is critical to business infrastructure, those Active Directory attacks and things like NTLM authentication are still going to need to be around.
NTLM stands for NT Land Manager, am I right?
Correct.
Okay, and that's a standard that was developed, gosh, before you were born?
Yes, I was born in 2000.
I was going to say that was a 1990s standard. Okay, no, I get it. I mean,
I'm sorry.
no, don't be. I mean, this is a challenge for a lot of manufacturing companies because in manufacturing facilities, they will amortize manufacturing equipment over decades.
Right.
And so those business folks who suddenly see, wait a minute, I've got this machine that's been working for 20 years and it's going to work for another 20 years. What do you mean this blankety blank software that I've had for 4 years and I've got to replace it now?
It's not even just manufacturing. Like healthcare too. Like healthcare has proprietary software that only runs on something like Windows 7, right? And not only is it both proprietary hardware, proprietary software that needs something like older versions of AD or older versions of authentication schemes, but it's the budget, right? If you don't have a budget and you're an IT director to upgrade and fix stuff, well, it's not going to get fixed.
Yep. Or the time to do things like real network architecture and isolation of the known to be vulnerable systems and whatnot. It's a huge lift that just people don't have.
We can get to security later.
Exactly,
and,
right.
And we can get to security later, and 5 years later, we can get to security later. I mean, is that a recurring theme?
Yes, 100%, 100%, yeah.
Gee, I never encountered that in my days as an IT director, previous job. Yeah, no, I get it, because a lot of these folks are working under the hurry up and get it done, damn it, mantra from the business professionals who are running the business. And that's not, I say that in a sarcastic tone, but that's not necessarily a negative thing. I mean, that is the reality of a lot of businesses. And so this is a paradigm shift for a lot of folks outside the security bubble to realize that, darn it, when we plugged into this thing called the internet, it is a new creature that we're not accustomed to. And, we're still writing the rules on how to deal with it and how to work with it. Yep. and how to survive in this new ecosystem we have in the 21st century. What kind of advice would you give to companies that are looking to somehow, some way be proactive and recognizing the limitations? What would you say are the most cost-effective ways that they could improve their security posture?
Yeah. I would say being tactical, like if they're doing nothing at this point, regular vulnerability scans, like those are things you can do with free and open source software right now, right? If you find out, go and look for, somebody with even a passing interest in that, and just scanning your footprint on a regular basis, your external IP address, your web applications, and just getting a good feel for that on a regular basis, and then just intaking that data and feeding it in and getting on a recurring basis, makes a humongous difference. And then the architecture and just starting to group together, systems that, again, we know these are vulnerable. We've got a whole string of, IoT devices that are never going to be updated. Just put them on their own VLAN, right? And it takes a little bit of a lift, but from a cost perspective, again, it's just essentially moving things on the network.
Again, for those outside the security bubble, a VLAN. Yeah. They hear these fancy terms that IT and security nerds use. No, I get it. Yeah. I understand it. But some of the folks watching might be that business person to whom this link was sent by their security nerd in-house, or their IT professional in-house, say, hey, boss, you need to see this. I think you might, understand some of this.
Yeah.
And so a VLAN, tell me, describe, if you will, to like your Aunt Bessie, what a VLAN is.
Yeah. So with the normal network, right, we're plugging in, right, or we're connecting to the Wi-Fi, and those are all, more or less physically connected to each other, right? It's on its own area of the network. The technology exists, VLANing, virtual LANing, right, where we can essentially use the same network hardware, but we can tag them in a way that says these systems, for all intents and purposes, live on their own area of the network and can't talk to other things of the network.
We got them like quarantined in a hallway that nobody's allowed to go into?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Yep.
So they could shout all they want and nobody's going to hear them.
Exactly.
Or be shouted at and nobody's going to be heard.
Yep, exactly.
And that's that VLAN thing. Okay, so those of you who are suffering from a case of manageritis, I get it. I mean, business people are busy too. That's what a VLAN means, and this is one way of mitigating or dealing with stuff that you can't update.
Exactly.
Like these IoT things, like these nice little outlets that we plug in that are $5 a piece on Amazon. You tap your phone, whoa, it turns on light.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That if it gets compromised, it can be a foothold into the network, right? There's full compromised botnets of security cameras out there. So it's a real.
There was just an
attack
article
surface.
on that recently.
Yeah. There's the
last
evolution
3
of
months.
the Mirai bot network. I think they've brought it back with some new hotness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. So those things, I mean, it matters, right? And we don't think about that because it's just a little consumer product. But anything that can be networked can be a foothold. So if we isolate them, even if they're compromised, it's contained, right? With the rest of the network is relatively safe, right?
Speaking of cameras, most cameras that I come across are unprotected, right? They don't have a password on it. I was doing a pen test for an unnamed bank, and there was a camera that was right behind the teller's desk.
I remember when this happened.
Yeah, and
Slow
I
motion.
could see the keyboard, and so what I did was hit screen record. I could see their username. I screen recorded them putting in their password, and that was my foothold into the
You screen recorded
network.
their finger positions on the keyboard
Yes.
and deciphered
Yes.
the teller's password from that camera.
Yes.
Brilliant.
And I was he had
Sinisterly
been my boss at the
brilliant
time.
because you had hacked into the camera. This sounds like out of Mission Impossible.
Well, the camera didn't have a
I mean, this
password
is-
on it.
Oh, the camera didn't have a password on it.
No. He
It just had a
was there
Hackney
when it
sign
happened.
on it,
He had been my
probably.
boss at the time. And he was like, "What are you doing staring at this camera feed?" And then he saw it was zoomed in on a keyboard, and he was like, "I know exactly what you're doing." Because I had been on this test for like a week at this point with no foothold because this bank had been extremely mature and secure. And sure enough, it was
Except for one
thing. And I had found with that user foothold, I had escalated myself to domain admin within 5 minutes afterwards. So it was like,
Domain admin in 5 minutes?
have you heard of Active Directory Certificate Services?
Yep.
So, would you like
AJ's
me to
having all the fun here, I'm telling you.
Would you like me to explain the full attack chain?
Maybe in a more technical podcast I would.
Okay.
I'm hoping that not just security nerds, who want to enjoy the conversation here.
Yeah.
But
So basically,
that some security nerd. There's a little link down in YouTube where you can copy and paste something, and then you put it in an email, and then you send it to your boss and your boss's friend and your other boss, and maybe the boss at the company that you're probably going to go work for because these bosses aren't listening to you. But you can do that just to share some of this conversation, and if nothing else, to start the conversation in your own organization, because pen testing is important, and trying to improve that attack surface is important. And technology, it's not just one technology. It's not just Windows. It's not just the operating system of the firewall. There's other, server technology, Linux OSs. I specialize in IBM iOS, so I'm familiar with the thing that the old timers call AS400. It's IBMi. It's IBMi. So yeah, I mean, all of these things are elements within the network that have their own footprint with regard to security, and they need to be secured.
Yep. And flavor of the week. Right now it's Active Directory Certificate Services. Before that it was Pure AD. Then it'll be a web server somebody compromises. So it's you can't just pick one lane and go.
yep,
You gotta
it's shifting towards
ever vigilant.
SCCM,
So in the
SCCM right
cyber
now.
version of like the equalizer, you're the tough guys that companies can bring in, and you can find
Set
out.
things straight, right?
I like to think of
find out
myself
where they
in
need
that way.
to be. They need to be considering where they can improve upon their security posture.
Absolutely.
Ken, AJ, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
And
the
good to
opportunity.
see you here at the Information Security Summit. And thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to this podcast for the Information Security Summit and also for Threat Hunter. And we wish Scott well, and hope you're well soon. Thank you.